Welcome back to the FloTrack podcast. I'm Kevin Selly, joined by Lincoln Strike. FloTrackPodcast@gmail.com is our email address. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and on the website, FloTrack.org/FloTrack podcast. Lincoln, there's a lot of track results to talk about this week. I'm incredibly excited to talk about results that actually happened in track meets.
I don't think we anticipated ever talking this much about the showdown in O-Town or whatever it was called and the big friendly. Those words meant nothing to me before 2020, but relative to the amount of track we've had so far, it's a lot. So yeah, tons to talk about right now.
Yeah, it was a busy weekend. And if you're thinking about how would this have looked in a normal year, obviously we'd be right around the Olympic trials and there would be
Mm-hmm.
Diamond League meets, but we've gotten out of the habit of tracking down results from all throughout the country. So what I wanted to do today was go through the 10 most significant performances of the weekend. Not necessarily the 10 best, because
Mm-hmm.
okay, Shawnee Miller-Weibo is awesome. We know that already. Noah Lyles is awesome, and they're going to be included on this list as well too. But what were the 10 most significant, the 10 most important? Because there were a lot of big names in action, Lincoln. It wasn't just a bunch of meets. It was a bunch of people who have won medals and have made teams and are at the top of U.S. and international track and field.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, from Lyles Gatlin to across the country, Donavan Brazier. There were plenty of stars showing some good fitness. Now I have a question for you: are we going 1 to 10, or are we gonna make this suspenseful throughout and go 10 to 1?
No, we're going to go 1 to 10. We're not going to pull a Ewan Gordon where you lead with the thing that the people are least interested in first, and then
Mm-hmm.
hope that
Yeah.
they hope that they stick around for the
Mm-hmm.
number one at the 52-minute mark. No, let's jump
Mm-hmm.
right in. Is your list the same? I put up a draft list. Do you have any
Mm-hmm.
problem with my list, or can we use my list as our list? Can I call it our list?
I'm fine with co-opting here. I would have had Bednarik a little higher, but I understand the star power of the names up top, the relevance of a
Okay.
certain athlete who hasn't been relevant for quite some time, running a good mark, being up there pretty high. So I can sign off on this.
Okay. So our list, our top 10. Let's start number one, and we go out to Portland to a meet that very few knew about before it happened. Even after it happened, people didn't know
Right.
about it because they waited to release the results. Of course, I'm talking about the big friendly between Pete Julian's group and the Oregon Track Club. And in the men's 1500, 800-meter world champion Donavan Brazier ran 3:35, lowering his personal best by a couple seconds, and did it in dominating fashion. Lincoln closed in 52 seconds. This was just a jaw-dropping reminder of Brazier's talent for me.
Yeah. One thing right off the top, the name "The Big Friendly" sounds like a Tom Hanks movie. So I did enjoy a nice laugh
That's
over
big.
over how
That's
over
big.
what they. Yeah, I know it's big, but then I think friendly, and I think of Tom Hanks. He just played
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Rogers. Anyways, okay. So Portlandia or whatever it's called, Tracklandia, posted the video yesterday, and the dominance that Brazier showed is comical. It's a 335, which on its own, if he had run even splits, is spectacular for a 142 800 guy who famously has never run a ton of miles and isn't
Mm-hmm.
really a miler, at least in the way he brands himself. But the way he did it, jogging with basically these underlings who are solid runners, NCAA level, high level guys who are now professionals, goes through and whatever it is, 243. Even at the beginning of the last lap, he's sticking with them. And then 250 to go, he goes to a speed that only he has right now and just absolutely blows everyone out of the water. To me, it looked like somebody who can run under 330 if he's so interested. We talked yesterday in our meeting, and we can get to this in a moment, about the need, the want, and the hope that he can maybe double at least at the Olympic trials, because that's how dominant he looked. 335 is a solid time. We know he can go faster, in a race like an Olympic trials final where it's sure to be tactical, who can match that speed? I mean, there's no one who has that 142 speed. It's not even just the 142 speed; it's that gear change. That last 250, I would love to know the splits. It was just absurd.
Yeah.
It is bar none the most impressive performance of the weekend. And we were texting last night. Him pacing the 800 was also hilarious because he jogs through at about a 49 or a 50. Not the best pacer in the world, we can say that, or at least he needs some work as far as pacing. Bram saw him; he is not, because he's too good to be a pacer.
Yeah. Craig Engels was like clawing for dear life to try
Yeah.
to latch on. I don't know how you watch that race and you come to any other conclusion that he wouldn't be one of the best 1500-meter runners in the world. And 335 has always stood as a marker because of its relationship with the qualifying standard as a key time to hit in the United States. And if you look at last year's times, fewer than 10 people in the United States ran that mark last year in 2019 in a world championship year. Would more people do it in an Olympic year? Possibly. But that's a style of race that you would think would be to the disadvantage of Donavan Brazier, right? Because time trialing for a guy who you said is a famously low mileage guy wouldn't be to his forte. So the fact that he could go 335, closing in 52, the last 100, Lincoln, the last 100, he's like looking around. It's like he's trying to put a governor on himself to not keep the throttle down and possibly run a 333. It's like he ran that fast by accident. So I
Oh,
don't know how
totally.
you come to any other conclusion from watching that other than this guy, if he wanted to be, would be one of the best 1500-meter runners in the world, and right now would be a top 3 runner in the United States in the
Mm-hmm.
1500. I don't know
I
how
don't
you
want to
watch
go.
that and come to any conclusion. I just don't know.
Mm-hmm. A sentence I didn't know I would say, even coming into this weekend, was I want to see Donovan Brazier against Timothy Chariot. I don't think it's too much of a stretch. I think that's somebody who has the skills to possibly combat Chariot's from the gun type nature. It's a little early to say, and we assume because he's never been an Olympian, and that the fact that at the Olympics you basically can't run the men's 800 and 1500 together because conflict of the schedule, of course. That he'll just do the 800, but he is someone that's if he can handle the workload, it would sure seem like he could at least try it at the trials. I know you spoke yesterday on your show about the possibility. What do you think? Does this increase the likelihood that he at least goes for this at the trials?
Well, at the trials, you have the 800 in the first portion of the meet because the trials is broken up into 2 distinct sections, and you have the 2 days where there's no running events in the middle. In essence, it's 2 4-day meets. So you go through the
Mm-hmm.
first 4 days and you have the 800, which is his best event, his preferred event. So you get that out of the way first. That's ideal. And then you would move to the 1500. So if he wanted to do it, it sets up perfectly. Now, does he do that in Tokyo? You said it's not advantageous because while he wouldn't need to run 2 races on the same day, last time I checked with the schedule, the day before the 800-meter final is the first round of the 1500. Now, don't get me started on why, when we have a 10-day meet, we can't keep these 2 events distinct when it comes to the Olympics, because that's a whole different podcast. But I don't know if he's going to do it. All I'm saying is I want to see him do it, and I think he would
Yeah.
be successful at it. I think he's good enough in the 800, and he's one of these athletes who their talent just overflows from their primary event. And he's
Mm-hmm.
just so good in the 800 that it carries him to do spectacular things in the 1500. Go back to, I mean, think of him as, and we think of him more as a 4-8 guy, right? Because he's run some 4x4 legs and some fast 400 marks, right? On splits
Mm-hmm.
going back to Texas A&M. But remember, when he was a high schooler in Michigan, he was running miles against Grant Fisher at the same
Yeah.
time. It's not like he's
Yeah.
just stumbling into this. Now, he hasn't done a ton of mileage, but a 142 person, you're going to let them hang around in a tactical
Yeah, I know, right?
1500? Right now, if you're racing Donovan Brazier in a 1500, you're putting yourself in with the exception of Chariot or with Ingebrigtsen, but of the mortals out there, you're putting yourself in a lose-lose situation. You're going to go out
Yeah.
hard and try to shake him off. Well, he's just going to latch right on you and outkick. You're going to make it
Yeah.
really slow. Look at what happened in that last 250.
That's just absurd. And yeah, he's a person that changes the whole scope of a 1500 if he's in the race. Now, I remember when he made his 1500 debut last summer at the Sunset Tour, and I was there. It was right after the race, but basically his suggestion was enjoy the 1500. Was hoping that it was his last one ever. Now, that was before he ran 142 and was a world champion. Perhaps he's grown to like it a little bit more, especially now he can see. He probably just found out, 3:35 is a good 1500 time. Well, I just jogged that, so maybe I should try this event.
Yeah.
The easier it is, I think, the more tempting it would be to take it on. I do think, not to put a downer on this, the fact that he's doesn't have an Olympic title, hasn't made the Olympic team yet.
Yeah.
Regardless of the fact that the 800 is before the 1500, the fact that he wants to be healthy going into Tokyo, and if he's healthy and assuming he makes the team, he's probably the Olympic favorite, as unless Nigel Amos can ever figure it out. I would think he would just focus on the 8, but the talent is unreal, and for him to do something in this like quarantine no season thing to up his profile, to make us realize he's even better than we thought is incredibly significant. And I didn't know it was possible given where we're at right now with track and field.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that fact. We didn't talk about the fact that this is his opener.
Yeah.
He hasn't raced outdoors, and he did this in a meet with little fanfare. The pacing was good. I'll say that. Like the race played out well for him. They shepherded him around the track, and as you said, just completely discarded the rest of the field and left them behind like it was nothing. I'm not saying, again, I'm not his coach, and it's not even fun to play that role, because then you're just like, well, don't do. No, as a fan, I want to see it. Who watches this race and thinks, I don't want to see this guy run a 1500? When Rudisha was in his prime and just dominating the 800, I wanted to see him dip his toe in it and just see what he could do when he extends that range just a little bit. I'm thinking back to Otto Bolden did a live chat on his Instagram a few weeks ago where he talked about when you look, and he was looking, I think, at sprints and distances, but when you look through the history of track and field, if you want to really, really be remembered as one of the all-time greats, you got to double at some point. And I know it's a little different when you're talking 8:15, because that's not like a 5:10 double. That's not like a 1:2 double. That's a different degree of difficulty.
Yeah.
And obviously you talk about someone like Alberto Wantarena doing a 4:8 double, which is just completely bananas. But maybe if you're right, if the Olympics and World Championships were flipped or something, and he already had an Olympic gold from last year, and this year was the World Championships, then maybe you play around with it. But I'm just saying, I want to see it. And if he tries and it doesn't work, I'm not going to second guess him and say, oh, that was a bad idea. No, like, go out and take your shot at it. You only have a few years at this point to capitalize, and you have to be so good to even entertain this as a possibility. Watching that last 250, how could you not? How could you not think that this guy's just scratching the surface in the 1500? I mean, and go back and watch his 800 from Doha. And I know Nigel Amos wasn't in the race, but he dominated that race. He, from gun to tape, absolutely tore that field apart. There was no question. And that was a World Championship 800 final.
Yeah, no, I mean, he looked like a varsity runner going against his JV squad. The move when he takes off with 300 meters to go, I mean, nobody, you could put Amos in there, whatever. He's run 141. I don't think anyone could say that Brazier could run 141 given the right situation. He's in a different league than anyone right now, and there may be, certainly in the U.S. he could be a contender right now in the 1500, and I think in the world right now, I don't think he can just say he's better than Timothy Chariot after one big friendly race, but he has that potential for sure. And just to be clear, what is it? Not since 1964, Peter Snell, that someone's won the 8 in the 1500. So
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
tantalizing because of the history, and what you mentioned with Bolden, I think is important. If you want to put a big imprint on your place in the sport and your legacy for your career, this is something to think about.
Yeah. Let's move on to number 2 because we have 9 others to get to, Lincoln.
Yeah.
That's how crowded we were. Trayvon Bromell, 10.04 in the meet in Orlando. Beats Andre DeGrasse, who was in his heat. Bromell, remember, just turns 25 this week. Hasn't had a healthy full season since 2016. This, to me, immediately puts him back on the map after years of struggles with injuries. I was surprised to see it. And for the U.S., just another person who can go sub 10 or maybe under. Just an impressive showing. He was not in the same heat as Lyles, and
Hmm.
Gatlin didn't get the same wind, but you're comparing him against a guy, DeGrasse, who just won silver in the 200 in Doha and just won bronze in the 100.
Yeah. Yeah. Bromell has switched things up. I think he's back in Florida, moved to Jacksonville, training with Raina Ryder. So he's training with DeGrasse. But the key is obviously his health. He's had significant issues with I believe his Achilles, had a surgery to fix it. Didn't go as well as he wanted. Got a bunch of scar tissue. Basically, he's raced 4, maybe 5 times since the 2016 Olympics and hasn't really been right since 2015. So it's somebody, not in the unique position of him having that big contract coming out of college with New Balance. He may have already been retired, but it is a game-changing performance if he can hold on to it, especially when you look at the landscape of the men's 100 right now in the
Mm-hmm.
U.S. And you mentioned this to me yesterday, but with Coleman, the uncertainty around it, if Coleman's out of the picture for the 2021 Olympics, I mean, Bromell, if he can hold on to this, like I said, is right there. Gatlin's, 39, and then we know Lyle probably going to double, as he said he would. The men's 100 could look totally different than it looked in 2019 by this time next year if Bromell is back anywhere close to where he was in 2015. I mean, he was the future of the men's 100 in the U.S.
Yeah.
I know we didn't really know Christian Coleman's name at this point, but he and DeGrasse tied for bronze in 2015, and you thought, I mean, this guy's gonna be challenging Bolt as soon enough.
Yeah.
And it just didn't happen because of injuries, and obviously Bolt retired. But his potential has been unrealized thus far. But a return to health, and he's only 25 right now and doesn't have a lot of races on his body. Immense potential, and this was a great sign for him.
Yeah, you mentioned DeGrasse. Those two have been linked since college in their NCAA battle at Hayward Field with the big wind, and DeGrasse ran those insane times. They go on that same year. They tie for the bronze. Then the next year in Rio, Bromell gets 8th in the 100 final, but he ran 9.8 at the trials.
Yeah.
DeGrasse medals. DeGrasse gets hurt for 17, but then in 19 he's back, but Bromell's not. I know this Olympic cycle is longer in terms of waiting between Olympics than previous ones because of the pandemic. But think what's happened since Rio. You mentioned Bromell, he was the future. Then people discounted him because he was completely off the map, and then he could be back on by the time he's 26 years old.
Yeah,
that's a whole career's worth of changes between 2 Olympic games. And if you just in 20 or 30 years, you go back and you look and you say, okay, who made the 2016 Olympic team for the U.S. in the 100? Oh, this guy Bromell, and then he made so he made it again in 2021. That makes sense. It's like no. That's not the story at all. There was a whole novel written in between those 2 Olympic games. If he's able to get back, it would be a incredible story if he's able to do this.
And I know we were skeptical of the notion that who benefits from the Olympics being pushed back a year, but I do think Bromell, if there's anyone, if he stays healthy, really does benefit from this. If he has 10.04 with a plus 1 point whatever wind is good, but it may not be good enough to make an Olympic team. You assume he's going to make significant gains. So another year to add fitness in this training group that he's still relatively new in, I think is big for him. But the thing this hinges on, again, is Coleman. If he's not there, if Gatlin is finally over the hill, the 100 has an entirely new look. And we could be talking about a team of Lyles, Bromell, and then whoever maybe Ronnie Baker or something. Three,
Well, the only lock,
three.
the only lo- the only lock right now is Lyles because of the
Mm-hmm,
uncertainty with Coleman, and I think
mm-hmm,
there's two spots left. There's going to be two spots left, and it's going to be a fight for those other two. But even if in 12 months' time or 11 months' time, if Bromell's in the 9.9s, he's at least in the equation. He's gonna
mm-hmm.
make that final, and then he's
Yeah,
got a shot to do it.
yeah. I will admit I thought Bromell was done as recently as last year. I mean, he didn't run at USA's, and I think he was running in the 10.4s and 10.5s. And we had
Mm-hmm.
caught up with him, intermittently over the last few years. And he'd say, "Well, I'm on my way back," and then he'd have a setback. And I just
Yep.
didn't, you don't know. I'm not with him obviously day to day, and so you don't know where his focus is. But the inability to get back and to be in any type of shape, I thought, nah. I mean, obviously a disappointing career because it was very short lived. But he got a medal. He made an Olympic final. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
not a embarrassing career by any means. Didn't probably live up to the contract, but I've obviously been proven wrong, and he has a desire to get back that I didn't quite know he did. Smart move, I think, to go with Raina Ryder. A lot of people have had success with him getting back home to Florida. Watch out! We forget it wasn't the Christian Coleman era, but this is a guy who won the 60-meter world title in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
He's very, very special, and it was easy to forget given all the injury troubles he's had.
Yeah. All right, let's go to number three. Let's go to number three, and a double from Shawnee Miller-Weibo, 50.52 in the 400, and then in the 200 into a headwind, she drops a 22.61. Now she's obviously awesome at this double. She's
Yeah,
done it several times, and she's also good at running fast early season. Now, it's weird to describe July as early season, but if you remember last year, Lincoln, in April, she ran 49 seconds. That was the same month or same weekend, was it, when Michael Norman ran the 43.45
yeah,
at Mount Sac? Everybody
yeah.
went crazy in the 400 in April, but just we shouldn't get numb. We shouldn't be immune to just how good Miller Weibo is in both these events.
Just another reminder, we got to see her in the double. It was a shame not to have her in the
Yeah.
200, especially how weak it was last fall. I mean, I know that Dean Asher-Smith is, remarkable, but she's a 200-meter world champion with basically no competition. And you look at Shawnee Miller-Weibo's record recently against Dean Asher-Smith, it's not even close. I think she's beat her like 6 races in a row. So this is the best 200-meter runner in the world. And you could argue the best 400-meter runner in the world, depending on what happens in Nasser's case. This seems like just a typical weekend at the office for her. The times
Yeah.
maybe aren't incredibly impressive. It sounds like there was some wind to contend with, and also, 50-52 in a season opener with no season ahead essentially is
Mhm.
totally fine. She doesn't have a bad race ever. So this is
Yeah.
standard operating procedure from Shawnee Miller-Weibo.
Yeah. You mentioned the opener. Easy to forget based on how fast everybody was running. And I thought the sprinters would take a little time to get going. I was proven wrong here. They'd be
Mm,
going even faster if they had some races, but Lyles, the next guy on our list at number 4, yeah, it was wind aided, but 993 out of the box
mm-hmm.
beats Gatlin
Yeah.
by 600ths. I haven't seen the race because I don't know if the video exists of the race. I'm sure it's
Yeah.
out there somewhere. Maybe we'll find it. It was hard enough to just find results, but Lyles, opening that quick, under 10 seconds, has to be promising. I know he's going to run is it the Inspiration Games this week? Is that what we're on?
Yeah. Yep. He's in the, what is it? Is he in the 150 or I don't know what it is.
He's
DeGrasse is
not in
in
the
the 100
100
yard.
yard.
He's not
Yeah,
in the 100 yard. Dang it.
I'm laser focused right now on the 100 yard because of our previous discussions about it. So
This
I don't
was
know if he's what he's in, but he's in something.
okay. Yeah. This is one where you really want to see the race because 993 with a +4 for somebody who's run 1950 and whatever nine. What is Lyle's 100 PR? Is it 988 or something like that? It's not incredible, but it's again, it's the same thing with Miller Weibo. it's what you come to expect. And beating Gatlin is a nice W for him. I imagine this was him shutting it down really early and just almost like the distance runner, the sprinter equivalent of a tempo run. I mean,
of a Donavan Brazier.
Yeah, right. I'm sure this was quite relaxing, quite easy for him. So it's good to see he's healthy. And we knew that. He ran that 300 time trial and looked pretty strong. I know it didn't impress Gordon Mack, who expects, roughly 3/10 under a world record anytime anybody goes out there. But for me, this is Lyles
Why
out
didn't he
there
run
doing
29?
what he does. Yeah.
986 is Lyles's personal best.
Yeah.
This is pretty good. This is pretty good for 993. Next up, this was not in Orlando. This was not in the United States, as far as I know. But Mondo vaulted 594, and I think we should just mention that, even though he vaults over 6 meters all the time now. But 594 is still pretty good.
Yeah, he's stationed in Europe in those empty stadiums right now. I don't know if there's any cardboard cutouts, but he's competing, I believe, in the Inspiration Games because the pole vault's kind of the event of 2020. I do have to admit, I think his indoor dominance made me think he was just going to be jumping over 6 meters every single time. I did watch him go over this 594, and he was pretty pumped up about it. He won, but he didn't have a super great jump at the Impossible Games last month. So I don't know if he's working through some things, but 594, we can't forget that's still an elite height, even if it's not the 617 he jumped for a world record indoors.
The empty stadium circuit has a nice ring to it.
Yeah,
he's going around and competing in every empty stadium in Europe.
He's having the time of his life.
Yeah. Let's go back to Florida though for number 6. Number 6 on here, Kenny Bednarek, 20:06 in the 200, and in the 100 he ran the final. There was prelims and finals. Lyles didn't run the final. Bromell didn't run the final. DeGrasse did run the final, but he was runner-up to Bednarek, who goes 10:14. So 10:14 and 20:06 for Kenny B.
Kenny B has a special place in my heart because we visited him at college last year for a workout Wednesday before he really, broke out running all those fast times at the JUCO championships, and then, albeit because of I was trying to think of how you're going to.
I was thinking of how you're going to describe what he did at JUCO, because breakout I don't think does it justice. I mean, I know it was wind dated, but those times were just stupid fast.
Well,
times.
His 1949 in the JUCO prelims, I think it caught some brands' eyes. That +6 win. I know he made the world championship team, but he got injured. He was one of the only guys at the standard. So it's like we're yet the world, as far as the small track and field world, has yet to fully see how talented this guy is. He's not even really a 100-meter runner. So for him to run 10:14 is significant, and to run 20:0 legal is spectacular. This is a guy who, if he's healthy and can kind of figure everything out, because there was some weird stuff with him. Like, I know he was injured, but ran off the track in the U.S. final last year, and I know it was injuries, but then he had a similar issue or got hurt at the World Championships. So you're waiting for him to kind of figure everything out, and he's very, very young. He would only be a college sophomore going into his junior year if he was still in college. So super, super talented. And my point being, this is an example of how good he can be, and that the international stage has yet to really see how much talent this guy has. This is a guy who should routinely be making 200-meter teams, 200-meter finals, and competing for medals.
Do you think we're going to see him in a 400 again, or do you think 10:14 is fast enough to where he's going to now become a 1-2 guy? Well,
I think Sean Merritt's too big. Yeah, I guess Fred Curley's pretty big. I don't think so. I mean, it seems like he's training to be a 1-2 guy, right? Not just based off this events, but
according to his TILA page, his 100-meter PR before this, his wind legal 100-meter PR before this was 10:42 from high school.
Yeah.
He ran a 10:22 wind aided in 2019. Meanwhile, in the 400, He ran that 44.73 at JUCO.
Yeah.
I'm
Great
fascinated
range.
by. I want him to be, or I don't want him to be. I don't care what he is, but I think it'd be interesting if he's a combo, like a Norman combo sprinter, like a 2-4
Mm-hmm.
combo sprinter, as opposed to just
Yeah.
a 1-2 person. But when you run 10:14, you start thinking, huh, maybe this is
Yeah.
my event. Like Bolt came down in distance. Bolt's one of the few people who has come down in distance throughout his career. I mean, he ran some really fast 400s, and then obviously he was always spectacular at the 2, and then just stumbled backwards into the 100, and then ended up being the fastest man in history. I
Mm.
wonder if Kenny B will have a similar progression here.
As Usain Bolt, probably not. But
No, progression in terms of how he chooses the
yeah.
event. I'm not saying he's going to run
I know.
95.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Or am
I'm
I
kidding.
saying that?
Yeah. I kind of see him as a pure 200-meter runner who can run those and would be on a good 4x4 occasionally. But I would imagine the 200 is where he's at. He's still so new. I mean, again, he never ran in the NCAA level, only junior college. Had a kind of a weird experience in the 2019 season where he goes pro, doesn't have a coach for a minute, then goes to Dennis Mitchell, then goes to USA's, gets injured, makes the US team based on Noah Lyles getting the bye, and then he's one and done at Doha. This guy needs a full season to kind of get experience, so I don't think we're going to see him in multiple events. I think he can be very, very special in the 200 and get that figured out and then maybe go from there. But this guy's kind of yet to prove himself, but the proof is, or he's showing that he's going to be able to if given the chance. This guy is spectacularly talented, really breathtaking talent that has not been fully shown yet.
He's only 21.
Mm-hmm.
That's the crazy part. He's only 21, and hasn't had a full season. Healthy in one spot. I think we'll see him on the Olympic team next year in that 200. There's definitely space in that 200 after Lyles. There's definitely space there. Let's move on to number 7. I have Sha'Carri Richardson, who ran 10:94, wind aided in the first round of the 100, and then came back and ran 11:05, which was wind legal. Even if you're just looking at the 11:05, I think this is a good check mark for her of she's healthy, she's back.
Yeah.
Low 11s, first race, first year, fully being a professional. And the women's 100 in the U.S. there isn't multiple spots locked down already and gets an open event right now. And
absolutely,
if she's able to run, obviously if she's able to run 10:75, she's going to be fine. But what I said last year after she ran 10:75 was she doesn't even need to ever run that time again to be great in the sport. So even if she goes next year and runs 10:9 into 10:8 or even just 10:9 at USA's, I think she'll be able to make the team with that.
Absolutely. And this was a really encouraging performance for her based on how poor things went at USA's in her season. So much. I can't think of any other recent examples where someone with so much hype. I mean, right after the 10:75, we said, well, she's probably a medalist now. And she was 19. Yeah. And then she goes and gets last in the 100 and withdrawals out of the 2 at USA's. I mean, just basically face planted in Des Moines. I'll admit I was a little worried. I said, is this a mental thing? Is this physical? She doesn't seem to be injured. And just was a huge disappointment at USA's. This is encouraging. She's in Florida training with Dennis Mitchell, which like that if you will or not, but the talent's there. It doesn't go away. And so you assume she's going to be somebody who's going to be making teams.
All last year we talked about how are the collegians going to deal with the long season? How are collegians going to deal with the long season? And Grant Holloway won gold, so a lot of the feeling was, it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah,
but it was a real thing, and her season lasted way into the summer and started way early.
Yeah, in January.
Almost the previous year, if you're thinking about like full-time training of December to get ready for January meets. So I think there was good odds that somebody was going to run really great at NCAA's and not run well at USA's. There were people were going to run out of gas. There's going to be somebody
Yeah.
who did it. For every Holloway, there's somebody else. And you saw Tiana Daniels, who didn't have her best race at NCAA's, and then comes back and runs well at USA's, and then makes the team, and then ends up making the final in Doha. It's just you never know how people are going to react to the long seasons. Next year, though, everybody's on the same page. The season is a normal length. I shouldn't say everybody's on the same page because we don't know what the page is because we're still in the midst of a pandemic. But if the season goes on like we're thinking it's going to go on and it's going to progress in the way we think it's going to progress, you're going to have a normal sized, a short turnaround, but a doable turnaround between trials and the Olympics. If anything, people are going to be wanting more time to prepare. They might come in a little undertrained as opposed to going overboard.
So your takeaway from Richardson last year was just that she had reached her limit and you expected her to, get back to being really, really spectacular. You weren't at all concerned about kind of how things ended?
No, I wasn't concerned because look, is she ever going to run 1075 again? I don't know. And I'm saying even if she doesn't, that was a special day. You look at all the marks that were put down that day. That was one of those performances. That was one of those meets. Not even that day, I guess, because the men. When men went first, right? Yeah, men, women, right? I'm losing. Yeah. Yes, men went first. So the day before, that whole meet for the sprints was obviously sensational. So, and if you told me she's going to have a great race and then she's going to go pro, she's going to have all these changes, and then she's going to try to, what was it, 6 weeks? Was it a 6-week break in between
Something
NCAA's
like that,
and USA's? That's a whole almost season worth of time there.
Yeah.
I mean, of course. And one thing goes wrong in the 100 and it really can set you back and make you look like you're in a different spot. I think her whole goal last year, her whole focus at the beginning there was NCAA's, and then she did it. But I mean, you don't cross the line the way she crossed the line and think that she can't do that again. She can't be great again. And I think she'll be fine. It's just a matter of getting. So, I mean, what's the biggest mark of a young athlete? It's lack of consistency and being able to do it multiple times throughout the year and not, you look at someone like Shelly and Fraser Price, right? Who's 10-7, 10-7, 10-7, like they're easy. Or as we mentioned before, Shawnee Miller-Weibo. And now that she's going to have a full season of preparation, you think that part of her game can develop, that part of her running can develop. But running 1075 once, you at least know, hey, I'm capable of that.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not like that's a top 10 world all time, but I mean, those are times that somewhat routinely someone like Shelly Ann Fraser Price or Elaine Thompson, when she's healthy,
but she's an outlier,
can run.
She's an outlier.
I understand, but not like it's impossible for
if
her
she has
to
Shelly
run
Ann Fraser, if she has Shelly Ann Fraser Price's career, she's going to go down as maybe the best sprinter of all time because that's what Shelly Ann Fraser Price is. I'm just saying she could run in the 10.8s, 10.9s, consistently, and make every team. She could make pretty much every team between 2021 and 2025, of which there are several teams to make in
17 teams, something like that. I don't know. Lost count.
There's 21 Olympics, 22 World Championships, 23 World Championships, 24 Olympics, and 25 World Championships. She can make 5 teams.
Yeah.
Just off that mark. She does not need. You can write this down, Lincoln. There will not be a single time in any of one of those 5 either trials or U.S. championships where 1075 will not make the women's 100-meter team in the U.S. I will put my name on that right now.
Yeah.
Wind legal. Sorry, wind legal. Before you write that down, wind legal.
Yeah, barring some changes in the rules to products that can be used, I don't imagine you're wrong there. Yeah, that's true. It's a good sign for her this weekend.
Let's go to number 8. We got 3 more here. Gatlin's 9.99. Just a reminder that he's still here. The fact that he gets to the start line and runs under 10. He lost to Lyles. Again, I don't think he needs to beat Lyles to make the team next year.
No.
It was a +4 wind, but he's still running at a high level.
Does Gatlin ever get back to a point where we can like where the general public, the people who maybe have dismissed him in the past, like when he's running, when he's going to be 40 or 39 next year, like will there be any appreciation for what he's doing, or do you think that most people are still going to be, well, he's a two-time drug cheat,
Well,
if you will? I mean,
there's
it is.
I think the opinions I think the opinions of him have hardened on both sides. I don't think
Yeah,
anything he can do at this point is going to change because he does have great admirers for what he's doing, and then there's people
yeah.
who are always going to be skeptical of what he's doing. And I don't think anything between now and when he retires ultimately is going to change which one of those two camps you're in. That's how I view it at
Yeah,
this point.
yeah. It's kind of a shame, because it would be nice if it definitely gets overlooked for the most part, and for good reason. I can understand the explanation on the side of people being tremendously skeptical, or if they're, even if they're not skeptical that he's on something right now, that they're not going to support it because he did serve 2 doping bans. But to have a guy that's like, in his late 30s being this consistent at the top of the U.S. and the world is crazy. It's it just doesn't happen in the sprinting world. So it's routine for him now. But I try to at least appreciate him for what he is. And knowing that none of us are perfect, and I know he's denied whatever and been associated. And you could point at, oh, he's back with Dennis Mitchell. Look at this guy. He has no integrity. I don't know. I'm not the person that needs to decide what the legacy of his career is going to be, and if he's a good or bad guy for the sport. But it is quite impressive how good he continues to be.
I am glad that I don't know if we're behind this whole. Well, now that Bolt's retired, at least the good isn't there anymore. But the whole good bad
Mm-hmm.
thing was getting a little tough to take in terms of these overwrought, oversimplified narratives that were pushed out there in 2015 and 2016, 2017. All
Mm-hmm.
right, number nine. Let's go back to Portland. Let's go back to Jesuit High School for the meet. I've already forgotten the name. What's the name of this meet again, Lincoln?
The Big Friendly. Just think Tom Hanks. Come on.
The Big Friendly, starring Tom Hanks, coming to a theater near you. He's going to get nominated for the Oscar for this one.
Yeah.
Chanel Price runs 2:01 in a race that featured Raven Rogers rabbiting. Constance Klosterhoffen was in there. Coco was in there, and Sabrina Sutherland. So a pretty good group of people they got together for a 4-person 800-meter race. It shows you what's possible. And I know in an article with Ken Go, Julian was quoted as saying, they want to try to do more of these. This one was a test event, and they wanted to keep it under wraps. They tested all the athletes, and they want to do more of these. I think obviously Bowerman wants to do more of these as well too. But it just goes to show you, on the distance side at least, you can get together a lot of really good people without having to do much traveling at all. The Eugene group, they
Well,
drove from 2 hours away, and then when you have the Julian group and the BTC group, they're in town.
it's such the advantage of being in that portion of Oregon is huge. I mean, if the logical conclusion of this, if it's safe and everything, is to get everybody together, get Bowerman in there, and maybe, I don't know, have it on the Nike track or whatever, and let's just have a fun meet. I mean, that's like almost, except for a few people, except for your Paul Chalimos and stuff. It's like that's like the middle distance. That's like almost a middle distance USA's. Like that's how good you put all those 3 groups together. Obviously, particularly Julian's and the Bowerman group. It's like that's a full-fledged Diamond League level meet in certain events. So I love the thought that this is just going to get rolling. I'm curious if you think Chanel Price can get back to. I mean, 2:01's pretty solid. I mean, do you think she can be a factor again in the US 800?
Gordon and I were talking about the women's 800 last week, and he and I both agreed that Wilson is a lock, and Rogers, you have to consider her as much of a lock as anybody can be in an 800 because we don't need to go
Hmm.
back very far in Olympic trials to know that anything can happen. But yeah, that third spot's open, and I think she could be there. And there's a huge group
Hmm.
of women who are in that 158 to 201 range. And you watch this race, and it looks like that was good rabbiting, but there's more time there on the table. I will point out Chanel
Hmm.
Price 2-0, 2-0 this outdoor season. She got that virtual win against the Atlanta Track Club, and now she gets the win at the Big Friendly. So winning is a habit. Winning is contagious, Lincoln. You start doing it, and you just get wins. But yeah, I wouldn't right now. A year out, I would in not count out anybody who's running 201 right now for the women's
Yeah,
800 for that
yeah.
final spot.
That's the world champion Chanel Price. Let us not forget 2014 World Indoor Champ. Kind
Yeah.
of had forgotten about her. I'll admit. I know she joined OTC, I believe, sometime in the last year. So maybe some
Mm-hmm.
more, group stability to put her career back together. She kind of like was doing a lot of pacing, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, oh, maybe she's transitioning into a role as a pacer, and maybe that was the
Yeah,
thought. And then she got back into it.
she paced Ababa's world record, and then maybe she thought, hey, this is a pretty good 800 time that I ran through. I should just keep running the 800.
Yeah, yeah. A high school
Uh,
phenom, and recaptured her career after college, won that world title, and then there hasn't been a ton since, right? I know injuries have been a
mm-hmm.
factor, but talent's there, and yeah, like you said, another player in the U.S. 800 scene if she can make it that far.
The other race at the Big Friendly, we alluded to it earlier, the men's 800, which featured Craig Engels trying to grab on to the back of a fast truck, a high speed truck, and Donovan Brazier. And then he was the only guy who finished. Jake Hayward was also in the race. Was Jake Hayward supposed to be the second pacer? But he was also behind Engels, and I'm wondering if Brazier went out
um,
so fast, Engels just
yeah,
scrambled to follow him, and then literally the other pacer couldn't keep up. I'd like to know the inside story of that race because I mean Engels went through in 51 ish and then ran 148. It was just a absolutely. It looked painful. I felt bad for him. I've
oh
never
yeah.
run that fast. I will never run that fast, but I could empathize with the feeling of man, you just left me out here on this island.
I mean, you just simply cannot go that slow. You're like, I'm only running 400 meters. Well, I got to at least go through in 50. I mean, I imagine it's impossible for him to go slower if he's running just a 400. I mean, I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
see him finish, right? Because he went through about
Yeah.
450 meters, and you're like, go, Donovan, go!
Yeah.
Like, let's see you
Yeah.
run 143 just for fun. But yeah, that was an interesting one. I don't know. Ingles was the poor soul that had to finish that. I surely was not
Mhm.
the intention to just have him finish. As far as a meet goes, thankfully Brazier was there to save the show because a three event meet of which one of the races only one person finished. There was a lot of pacers for how little track and field or track there actually was. Like Jenkins was in a race, didn't finish. You mentioned Raven
Did he
Raj. There
start?
was just a. I
I don't
thought
think
he. I
Jenkins
thought
started.
okay. Maybe I'm
I mean,
mistaken. There was a lot of names that were floated that didn't ended up finishing. Thankfully, Brazier
the fifth,
saved it.
the 1500 had Osako, the marathoner, who was again hanging on for dear life. There it had Paulson, Sietti, and I think Hayward paced that one as well. Too. I mean, they crammed 3 events in there, and you got a 335 from a transcendent talent out of it. It was good. I'm
Yeah.
not going to complain. It was a
No.
solid
Yeah. No.
meet.
No. Yeah. Yeah.
What's interesting to me is the fact that, and we saw this with the Bowerman meet that we talked about last week. You and I talked about last week. You watch these videos, and it's just eerily silent. Like there's more people at a regular practice probably for some of these
Yeah.
athletes than there are at these meets. Yes, there's a timing company, but it's so interesting that they can still run these fast times without having the crowd. They're putting their uniforms on. There's other people in the race, and I guess you can trick your mind into doing it. But does it surprise you at all that these athletes can churn out these world class times in conditions that aren't in any way related to what they would see at a trials or a Diamond League
Yeah.
meet or a World Championship?
I'm sure there's some impact in time by not having the adrenaline spike of a loud crowd. Does it surprise me? I mean, no. I guess you'd have to get to the level of like an American record for me to be like, wow, and they did this with no fanfare. That's
Hmm.
where I would think of. But I mean, Donovan Brazier broke the American record with no fans in Doha, so he's used to it. I'm just kidding. But
I was waiting for the
yeah,
Doha dig there. It just took you a little
yeah,
while.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
but I mean, but or even just there's no stakes. There's nothing on the
Hmm.
line, really. It's
Yeah,
it's just interesting because you think of athletes, they get conditioned to compete in these really high pressure circumstances, and replicating that is really hard to do. And this is the complete opposite. Now, the only thing I could think of is just you've always you do hard workouts, right? And then it becomes you competing against yourself. So it doesn't
yeah,
matter if there's 30,000 people watching, or if it's your coach and your the coach and the stopwatch. It's you're just running against yourself. And I'm sure you've known this from when you've run. Like, I'm sure you've run times in practice that have been close to what you've done in races. Just because if you're having a good day, you're having a good day. It doesn't really matter who's around you at that point.
yeah, yeah. And I think you know these athletes are used to being in good shape in July. Like I think
Yeah, yeah,
we thought. I mean, I'm sure there's a big difference from where they would be in normal circumstances, fresh off the Olympic trials, than they where they are now. But I mean, I think with when some of the schedule return to the Diamond League, and I know some people in the U.S. are still on the fence of, well, we don't even know if they're going to be allowed to travel, but they're still on the fence of whether they're going to go overseas and race or not. I still think that it's natural habit to be like, well, it's midsummer. I mean, it's you get shape, you get in really good shape, you get sharp this time of the year, and I know it's different than what it's going to be next year,
yeah,
but I just think there's habit there, and you just kind of that's the normal progression, and you build. You're saying let's kind of shape this like a normal season, so then we can have a normal off season, and then we'll build
hmm
back up. You might as well, and there's still some value in just running good performances, even when there's no stakes. There's for this, I mean, Brazier, he gets this thing to where, oh, I can toy around and run a really fast 1500. That's going to help him going forward as far as confidence, surely. So there's value in this, even if there's
yeah,
no prize money, if there's no teams to make, if there's no Diamond League points to accrue.
yeah. And we saw this last year, so this predates the pandemic. But at least in terms of Bowerman, they're reinventing a little bit, remixing the idea of how this track season is structured, because they're saying, okay, well, why are we going to go to Europe and travel all that way to try to run a fast time with potentially
Right.
inconsistent pacing in an unfamiliar setting? Why not we just do this at our track? We'll get the world's most overqualified rabbit in Mohamed, and then we'll just run these. Or on the women's side of things, we'll get, they just had Houlihan and Schweizer rabbit that women's 5,000. What is the point of going all the way
Yeah.
over there? Like, what you gain by being in a big time European meet, you lose in terms of lack of uh, lack of consistent pacing. Sometimes a race not focused around you, and long travel time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
well, let's do this here. So I wonder, and this would all be predicated on the money, because I know the money is made over in Europe, but it's patently obvious that you could recreate these circumstances here. And if these athletes are willing to race a lot over here, and even from the perspective of sometimes they don't race that much at all too, I I wonder if something could catch on in that
Mm-hmm.
regard, of just like
And
just taking those Oregon groups, right, and having them run a series of meets in July, whatever, every year, where there's insanely fast times. I mean, why maybe get Europeans to come over here? I don't know, down the line.
the question is, can the Pacific Northwest provide the hospitality and tremendous prize money of a Leuven? I mean, who is going to replicate the waffles of Belgium? Who is going to
That's true.
replicate the art scene of Paris? No, I don't know. It's so ingrained the European
Yeah.
circuit that you wonder if something like that can change. But when you do have so much talent, especially, I mean, I don't think the pandemic's going to disappear by this time next year, right? I mean, it may be,
Mhm.
hopefully it's lessened and we've figured out our ways to socially distance and quote unquote safely travel. But this is still going to be a thing, I think, a year from now, to where people are going to have to consider, do I travel across or not? Or do I save it for, do I just
Mhm.
run a US season and then no, I got my big trip to Tokyo, and the rest is try to be domestic. Obviously, there's Diamond League stuff and not, but I think it's blossoming right now because of the circumstances, and it could become even bigger. One, as we continue to grapple with this pandemic, especially here in the U.S., and then also with just going forward, how much talent we have, and maybe it's unnecessary to go to these kind of this boutique
Yeah.
meets in Europe when we can do it here.
Yeah, you can break 13 in the 5,000, or the women can break 1450 in the 5,000 with
Yeah,
just your teammates and a timing company. Don't
yeah,
need
yeah,
fans, don't need travel. You literally need nothing else. That's what they're proving. They're proving that that is more valuable than whatever you'd get by going over there. Now it's different, obviously, for sprints or for middle distance. You're trying to work on tactics, but from the pure, I just want to run an insanely fast time. I want to get an American record. Why? Like, there's something with to the idea of the familiarity of who's running with you and the pacers that really is clicking with these groups, I think,
absolutely.
and the comfort of
Yeah,
home one
yeah.
more here, one more, because we got to get to number 10. Jared Ward, as predicted by me, gets the win over Jake Riley in
Mm-hmm.
the virtual 5K, 1409 to 1458.
Dominant.
Take that, Lincoln.
Yeah, I made my prediction for, I feel like I made my prediction for Jake Riley before he signed with On. If I would have known he was with On, I
Mm.
would have changed. No, I'm just kidding. Um, yeah, bearded Jared Ward, something to
I like
prove
it.
after that Olympic
Yep,
trials disappointment.
I like it.
I don't know what if he's what his plans are, when his next race is going to be, but he really took it to Jake Riley here. Maybe the I don't know, whatever it is, 500 or 800 feet less of altitude had a big advantage. Maybe his course was a lot easier, or maybe he was just way better on the day. Probably a combination of all the factors. But that road 5K Olympic team's looking pretty. Oh wait, that's not a thing. Just kidding. Yeah,
You know what
no,
I learned
nice
from
win for
this?
him.
I learned that you really can't tell the difference when two people are running side by side. If one person is running 1409 and the other person is running
Yeah,
1458, who's running faster?
mm-hmm.
Looked pretty
Yeah,
similar, but
yeah. That
this
is
is fun.
tough.
The coaches doing commentary, I thought was great. Riley, at least in the beginning too, seemed like he was turning a lot.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know
That's
if
his
that.
fault.
I know they mentioned the different groups were talking about how they came up with the course they were going to use because they didn't want to make it too easy, didn't want to make it too hard as well. But yeah, Ward hadn't run a 5K in 6 years, like raced a 5K in 6 years.
Yeah, what was it like? I mean, 14:0 on a court, like
Nine.
on a road course. Yeah, 14:09 on a road course with no competition other than on an Instagram stream he couldn't see.
Yeah,
Is really good. It's really good
yeah.
for a marathoner, particularly who hadn't run a 5K in that long. Oh yeah, really, really, really impressive. How does it match up with Sha'Carri Richardson's 100? I mean, we'll leave that for the rest to say. You're putting it below it. You're going to have to answer to that on people online. People are going to get angry at that, but that's your cross to bear, I guess.
Yeah, send an email, flotrackpodcast@gmail.com. That's the top 10 of the week on our very subjective rankings. Thanks to Alon for producing. Thanks to you, Lincoln, for co-hosting. Thankfully, we did not have any technical interruptions here with Gordon jumping in midway through. We will talk to you guys tomorrow.